Welcome back to episode number 8 of the Unicorn Perspective. This is a take 2 of the episode. We have with Ecamm Live. It's a pretty great piece of software, except for bringing on guests, because you need to initiate them on Skype and then pull the Skype feed in Ecamm Live and then send the Ecamm Live feed into Restream, and then Restream sends the feed to a million other places. And so inevitably something goes wrong. But I think we got it figured out. So everyone here now can actually see Morgan. He's not an imaginary friend of mine that I was talking about. He's a real human being in a great little office there that most people I've interviewed don't have nearly as prestigious of an office with a law degree in the background there. But we'll take this from the start, right? Because I know some of you probably already watched maybe the first 4 minutes, 5 minutes. We're going to pretend like that didn't happen. So just neuralize that Men in Black style, and it'll be good to go. Let me start with this, Morgan. So it's probably where I should have started, and so this gives me a second chance to do that. What do you actually do, right? And I've actually, this is actually for me. I don't know what you do, but in all seriousness, like for people watching, because you're not the typical like marketing guest that we have on here, and what you do is really interesting, and the companies that you run are really fascinating, and you're doing some really exciting stuff. I think it'd be helpful for everyone just to get a 2-minute overview of what FinMC, what they're doing, what you've done the last few years, what kind of the future holds, and then we can dive in from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Max. And so with FinMC, it's Financial Media Core. We actually started out as an advertising agency, but really focused, kind of like laser focused on the financial publishing space. So if you're not familiar with that space, it's like financial newsletters. The thing that's most common to people is, like, for example, if you've seen like Motley Fool, like that would be kind of the space that we operate in.
Yep.
And so we started this model where we would go out and find like email lists and do email list rental, and kind of play the agency game where we're kind of like the middleman. We find the supply, we find the demand, put it together, and take our like 30%, 20%, whatever the middle fee is. And over the years, we kind of morphed a bit and started creating our own websites, got really heavy into lead generation and building out our own websites, just with the idea, if you're a media company and you're selling media, it's a lot more profitable to sell your own media than to pay out, like 70 or 80% to a publisher. So we started our own sites. And then over the last year or two, really kind of took that a step further to say, well, let's actually start launching our own products. And so we've done a lot of joint ventures where we'll find someone that maybe is like a really good trader or investor but doesn't have a big following, and kind of like put our marketing bandwidth behind them. And that's sort of like morphed us more, where I'd say now we're a bit of a media company. We're still a media company, but really more of a publishing company. So it's kind of like we kind of like define ourselves as a publishing company that's driven through media. And then recently, this past year, have started to branch a little bit outside of the financial space with the partnership that we're working on with you on both like the wealth and the political side. We've got a site that's pretty cool. It's called everydayspy.com, with like a former CIA operative, and even getting into a little bit of the like fitness self-defense space as well. So it's kind of like the path that we've been on the last couple of years.
Yeah, so just for everyone that's watching, I mean, this is something that I've been talking about more, and I've been talking about it more because of like our relationship mainly with Morgan, and it's kind of inspired us and motivated us to think bigger in terms of how we're structuring deals, right? So, we spend so much time just like running media for other companies, and just hey, we'll run your Facebook traffic, we'll send you traffic, and you build the brand, you build the business, you get the leads, and then you sell it down the road for whatever you want. And now it's been more like, well, how can we actually build our own brand and become this bridge between the offer owners and the audience, essentially. So we can simultaneously, right, run people through our lead gen, our lead magnets, our quizzes, our polls, whatever it might be. They can go into our list, and simultaneously they can go into partner list. And that's been so eye-opening for us, and that's given us just a lot of ammo, I guess, going into building these brands going into the year, especially with how expensive it's gotten to run Facebook and Google ads, where it's like, if you're not making money on day one, the deal doesn't make sense. So, you had a partner in that business, and it's kind of evolved over time. Like what got you into that space? Because I don't think we've ever talked about like your background before starting the company, but how did you get into like the financial market, the offer market?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. My dad actually had he had like a small like financial publisher, but also a futures brokerage firm, and And so like I would work at his office during the summers, but he actually had there was this trade set up where it used to be like if all the European markets were going in one direction, and this is, probably, like 15 or 20 years ago, before it was really like global trading and everyone followed everything. But if like all of Europe was all up in the morning or all of Europe was down, the US market, you could trade the futures market and it would go that way like right up until the New York Open. So one of the cool things with it was like a really like high probability trade, but the downside was you had to check like every morning at 3:30 to see if it was set up, and it would only set up like 2 or 3 times a month. And so he had some clients in, and they were talking about this trade and saying like, hey, it's such a good trade opportunity, but I'm not going to wake up 20 of the business days out of the month for maybe 1 or 2 days. And one of them jokingly said like, hey, I'll pay you, pointed to me, he's like, I'll pay you $100 if you'll do it and just call me. And when you're like 16, it's like $100, like that's a lot. And so I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. So I started with like him, and I think at the top of that deal, I got to like 33 people that were doing it, which was like $3,300 a month.
Yeah.
When you're like 16, it's like I'm a bajillionaire. I've got like $3,000 and no
I'm gonna
expenses.
retire.
So yeah, I can basically retire. Like I don't even know why I'm still working at this point. But so anyway, so I'd wake up every morning at 3:30, check these markets. Most of the time I'd go back to bed. 2 or 3 times a month I would actually like, and this was before like text messaging was real big and Skype and stuff like that. So I'd actually like call their house, say, hey, this is Morgan, there's a trade set up, just get up, and then they would go trade it. So it was, which is pretty interesting. Like sometimes like I'd talk to somebody's wife or girlfriend that, like didn't appreciate a call at 3:30 in the morning. And then, some people were like, I guess maybe there's like lonely people, they'd want to actually talk on the phone for a while.
You're on the phone for hours.
Yeah,
that actually,
like questions.
that actually happened. Funny story. So that actually, our customer service people back in the day with the Trump coin, that was one of the problems. So like we'd have, some senior citizens, people that are, their 80s that, bought a coin or something like that. And they would come up with a problem just to get like a phone call from our customer service people. And some of our customer service people were on the phone for like 30 minutes with these people because they just wanted to know like, well, what are you doing today? How's your day going? What's the weather like out there? And you feel so bad, but it's like, you got to get out, you can't be on the phone for 30 minutes with each person. They're not spending any more money. Yeah, it's funny how there's people that are just like, I don't want to talk to you. And there's people that like, I'll keep you on the phone all day long and I'll have a lengthy conversation, like pen pal style.
Yeah, exactly. So, so that was kind of like my start, I guess, in both the financial space and also, like selling a product of, this like call service. So I did that. And then, I guess in 2011, I started a site called tradingpub.com with the general idea is like I'm going to create like a free educational website and like go get different like traders to come write about the markets and things like that. And really had like no idea how I would make money with it. Just that I was like, if I can get a big enough audience, I'll figure out how to monetize it. And that sort of led into, like the media stuff, and then just sort of snowballed as the company kept growing.
Got it. I think one of the things I've kind of brought up this idea of, CPLs and co-registration and talked about it from a media buying perspective in some of the groups. And I think one of the common questions or responses I get from a lot of people, especially people that are newer to, maybe not new to media buying, but they're newer to actually like, how do I monetize this skill essentially? Like, and if they wanted to get into that space, right, in terms of like finding offer owners, finding people that, need traffic, or maybe they don't even need traffic, but they would be interested in it. Like what's that process like when you started? How did you initially get somebody to give you the time of day and say, hey, I'll put in an order for, I'll give you $10,000 for, 1,000 leads?
Yeah. So initially I grew a lot through, like in our space doing like swaps are pretty big. So I didn't really have a list to do swaps with. So what I would do.
Can you explain that for people just in case they don't know what a swap is?
Swap would be like, hey, I've got an email list, you've got an email list. I'll send out your offer, you send out my offer, and then we'll kind of exchange leads based on that. Is kind of like the traditional email swap method. What the approach that I took was this was like webinars had just started coming out and like we're getting big, and so I would do what we call a multi-speaker webinar. So I'd go to like 4 or 5 traders or people who had an email list. I'd say, hey, we're going to do this big event. You get an hour to speak. Everybody will promote and then we'll do some type of lead share based off that. So like let's say like company one sent like 200 leads, they would get 300 leads back. So for them, it was a good deal because they got more leads back than they sent in as part of the swap. But also like if I had 5 companies doing it that all sent 200 leads, really like their exposure, they were getting in front of 1,000 people. So it was good for them to get in front of a large group of people. Whereas normally if they just sent to their list, they'd only get in front of 200 people. And then obviously like it was good for me because all 1,000 people would, like end up on our list. So that was kind of like the start that got us going. And I really didn't monetize it for I think the first 6 months, I think like gross revenue was like maybe $1,600 or something. Like it really, was nothing. And then in the second year started to monetize it through a company that's called FinMC, which is now a part of. So I actually ended up becoming like a client of Financial Media Corps and used their offers. They were a network that had offers that you could monetize. And there's a lot of those out there, no matter like what field you're in now, like affiliate networks where you can go and just pull from affiliate offers. So like with your question of like, how do I find these deals, or like CPA deals, which is like cost per acquisition, or a CPL, which is a cost per lead deal. Whatever market you're in, you can find, an advertising agency that probably has a pool of offers, and you can use that to help offset some of your leads that come in.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think there's a lot of opportunities out there if you have, the right skills. I think the tough thing, and this is what you just brought up about like the first few months or even longer than that, you're not really making much money. It's, do you want to get in this to build an asset that is something that can be, monetized a bunch of different ways that can actually be sold eventually? Or do you want to get into something to just make quick cash, drive traffic to something? And that's, I think, a struggle that a lot of people are dealing with right now is like, which of those paths do I take? And if I go the route where I need to actually build something up, like what is required of that, right? So when you guys first got started, where were you investing? I'm sure you didn't have a ton of capital at the time, but
Right.
Where were you investing in terms of growth? Were you investing in content? Were you investing in salespeople? Were you investing in, media buying? Where was the initial focus to get the most momentum?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think, like one of the things that was an advantage when I first started it, I had another job at the time. So it wasn't like, it's like, well, how'd you go 6 months and only make $1,600? Because I had other income. So it's kind of like doing this on like the nights and the weekends. And then as it started to take off, I shifted, I shifted to doing that full time as opposed to my other job. But, my first investment, like it was really in traffic. So that's one thing, like when you talk about like with what you guys do with driving traffic and kind of like what we've talked about of building an asset, I feel like traffic is kind of the ultimate currency. And we'll see this a lot when we talk to people in our space who will come, they'll say, well, hey, they'll look at one of the bigger companies in our space and they'll kind of just compare their product to it. And they'll be like, I've got a much better product, or like my product's like 10 times better than so-and-so company that's this $100 million or $200 million company. And it's like, well, yeah, but like in a way, a product only, like the product matters. It matters a little bit on conversion, but it matters most on refunds as far as like the experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that you see, and I know like in your space with you guys pour like a ton of time and effort into making the training product so like such a good customer experience. But there's also, you probably have to in a way like overcome a lot of objections people have because they bought other products that were kind of sold as this like, black box, magic box, like
all the
traffic system,
time.
and they buy that and it doesn't work, and so really that's where the product's so important. But the most important thing in getting something to scale is the traffic side. So it's both traffic and then copy as well. Like the sales copy is very important in our space, especially. So I invested a lot just in traffic and building the list. And because I didn't have my own products, like we were just a free website, it kind of took the product side out of it. So I was just able to focus on how do I get more traffic? How do I, like get more leads, have bigger events, and over time, like began to figure out ways to monetize it.
Yeah, I wonder on the product side, that's a huge struggle. I think with any info-based business, right, is because there's so much competition there, it's inevitable that most of the people are going to under-deliver in value, and that's going to burn, the customer expectations or customer belief and customer confidence. And so it becomes that much harder just to get that person to trust you. I mean, when you're looking at offers out there, how are you measuring that? Because I think for what we do, it's I wouldn't say easier, but it's a little more straightforward because it's like it's running Facebook ads, and there's less external factors, right? Obviously, Zuckerberg can decide, I want to make a big algorithm change. We want to turn off a feature, ban somebody. So there's still some kind of trends that we have to keep up with. But with what you're doing, if you have one of your businesses is, teaching options trading or, investing for growth in the stock market, there's hundreds, if not thousands of external factors that can impact that program, right? It could be the best program in the world, but there could be a massive downturn, volatility that, the market's been down 900 points the last, 3 days. How are you like blending those two things and looking at like what makes, I guess, two questions. One, what makes a offer when you're deciding whether to, buy a company? I know we'll talk in a bit about like how you structure those deals because it is really interesting. But in terms of just like due diligence, I mean, what are you looking for in an offer in a program versus, ones that you turn away?
Yeah, so usually the easiest thing is just like I'll sign up for their service and follow their trade. So a big thing in our space is like, hey, here's my track record, or here's my trade recommendations, here's where they are. And the biggest thing I look for there is like I'll get a text message that says like, hey, I'm buying Apple at this price, and I'll go check like, is Apple actually at that price? And then like if they have a losing trade, do they record it the same way that the user received it? So like those are usually like the first things that I do, just to make sure that it's not like somebody that's just like kind of like blowing smoke or saying like doing like a fabricated track record. And then also just like looking at the product, like looking at their background is really important. That's one of the things like with an info product space. And one of my friends said this is like, nobody wakes up, like, gets up in the morning, brushes their teeth, has their cereal, and says like, I'm going to go buy a financial newsletter today. Yeah. It's like you have to really like put it out there and, like in a way like sell it and convince someone why they need it. And so a lot of it's like the credibility of the person and the sellability, like, are they sellable? Like, what is their personality like? And there's guys in our space, some people who it's like they might be like a really good trader, but we could never sell them just because of, like the way they come across on camera. And that kind of gets back to like the product. People don't buy just off of the, like the merits of the product. They have to, you have to have the copy and the whole presentation. So that's a little bit of a difficult thing. That's kind of like who has the it factor, of like this guy might, be a genius, but I just don't think he can sell. And that's the thing. Like we've made some really good choices with that. We've had somewhere where we've had to like tweak it or make changes after we got going, but you never really know till you started on that.
Do you think we were just talking about kind of volatility in the market and external impacts. Do you think what's happening right now is like beneficial? I guess the question is, volatility in the market or stability, up market, bull market, bear market, like your business is heavily tied to the economy. I know when we used to do stuff for like Rival Media and did stuff for Perry and those guys, they loved recessions because they said like a recession, their market they just crushed it because everyone's buying survival stuff. The world's gonna end, right? But during good times, they're just nobody's buying food buckets and year food supplies and stuff. How are you handling that in terms of like blending, kind of external influences, the economy, the stock market into a business where you need to kind of keep the business stable and have consistent growth, but there's stuff happening outside. Trump can say tomorrow, like you're just banning China from selling anything to America, right? And the market could tank, 1,000 points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And probably like any day there's like a, 23% chance that he will say something like that. It causes the market
23, 25%.
Yeah. I think like, scientifically proven at 23.8, but it's
like
and the market could go up like, 1,000 points or down 1,000 points based off of that. But I think from our standpoint, it's definitely better to be in a bull market, just because people, are feeling good and like they're spending money. So it's sort of like you can sell, you're either like selling fear or greed, kind of like you were saying with a lot of the survival products. They sell based on fear. It's like they're going to take your guns. They're going to take the, like you need to prepare or the world's coming to an end, like that type of that type of a message works well when there's, fear in the air. With our stuff, it changes, so you have to change a little bit of the marketing approach of, like why people are investing. So for example, if the market's going down, it's, like you can change more to, there's actually like shorting strategies or like more protective strategies or
Yeah.
like buy on the dip type strategies. But as a whole, just looking at like our general business, it's definitely better in a bull market. And we've been in one since, like 2008. So it's kind of unprecedented that a lot of people in the space now haven't really been through a bad market. Like there's dips and falls. So like for us, it's okay if the market has a big down day, it actually probably helps a little bit because it makes people more attuned to it. If it gets to a point where the market's like just like getting hammered every day and gets back to like recession mode, it's going to be negative. It would be a net negative factor for our business. And I think that's an area where, by kind of like controlling our own inventory, it probably will allow us to fare it a little bit better than maybe someone who's just doing kind of like the arbitrage traffic or looking for kind of like the fast money. It's just that like you look at, like a big thing in our space is like earnings per click. It's like an EPC. And the difference just might be like, hey, right now maybe like there's an EPC on something of like $5 or $6. If the market's bad, you're probably looking at like $3 to $4. So you just have to factor those things in, that your margins are probably going to tighten a good bit.
Or by hedging, right? I think this is what you're doing, which is pretty interesting. And I don't think a lot of people are doing this, which is scary. And this is historically, most people are pretty bad about like diversifying and managing risk. I think it's kind of human nature. Like when you're really into something, you go all in on it and you don't really think about what can happen a day from now or a year from now.
Right.
But if you're now getting involved in survival, we obviously have our political business. And so it's, for those purposes, it's obviously not ideal. In an ideal world, you would have all those everything would be going great, right? You'd have the economy still growing and Trump still kind of saying crazy things and being polarizing and growing all of them. But in the event that there is a recession, you have, this everyday spy and you have the survival business and you have these different businesses, politics that usually perform well. There's kind of the direct opposite of, performance compared to the financial business.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the plan is one to look at like, you look at like your skill set, and you guys do this too and work in, like it's not like you only run ads for like one type of thing or you only focus on like one platform. It's like, how can I like take my skill set and in a way sort of like one step over of something where it's like still a similar audience. So that's one thing. Like if you look at like all the areas we're involved in, it's still kind of a similar demographic. It might not be the same type of product, but it's very similar. So it's like we know certain things will translate. It's not like you can, sell a Trump coin or sell, a spy course the same exact way you would sell a financial newsletter, but there are going to be things that you learn along the way that you can apply to each side of the business.
Totally. And I think the something that beyond hedging and diversifying your risk, that you've done is also build a great team. At least, we're not in your office every day, but every time we just got back from, Jacksonville the other day for kind of a quarterly meeting. And every time we come into the office, you have a growing team. You're moving into a new office, right? Cause you need more space. But there's like a great vibe in there, right? Like you have a zombie, you have a community dog who's just awesome, who walks around. Like everyone looks like they're having a good time. You have Pizza Fridays. You have like just a great culture. I mean, we don't have Pizza Fridays. I wish we did, even though I couldn't eat the pizza anyway. But from a hiring perspective and a community development perspective, is that something that you're really handling, or did you find somebody that's really good at that and you kind of given them the power to hire and build culture?
Yeah, so I'd say like initially I did a lot of the hires, and as we've grown, we now have like a team of people that does it. So I'm actually like I was telling someone the other day, it was like really cool. I walked in and like had to introduce myself to someone. Like I had to do that a couple times like the past month. Like, hey, nice to meet you. Just because like I'm no longer involved in the hiring process, which is sort of like, I think one thing like as business owners, and whether you're like a business owner or you're just in a business, like you have to over time like give up, give up your toys. Like you have to fire yourself from certain things in order to grow. And one of the things we focus on, like when we hire, we don't really, we don't do a ton of like, what is your resume, or you need this certain requirement, or like I don't think we've ever asked someone like, what college did you go to or what did you major in? It's really just more of like trying to get to know them as a person, and like, are they going to be a bit of like a cultural fit? And then also like, do they have the proficiency to do it? So especially in our space, I know like in pretty much any like internet business space, like very few people like come out and say like, hey, I got a degree in how to, like run ads on Facebook or how to write financial newsletters. And so it's just like, okay, are you a smart person? Do you have a certain skill set? We'll usually, like our interview process is usually, that we go through resumes, we'll post a job. We have our head of HR, which is Stephanie. She'll go through all the resumes and set up like a call and kind of just like feel the person out, like find out like what their goals are. We try to be like very upfront in the sense it's like whenever you hire a new person, the business usually like loses money for probably like the first 6 months, and especially like if it's a new field, like it's rare that someone's going to come in and be an expert. And so we try to say like, we're really looking for someone that can be like part of a growing team, and like what are your aspirations, and try to define that long-term piece. So we do that, and then we always give them some type of exercise, and the exercise is really just to judge a little bit of their competency and their creativity of being able to like take something that they're not trained in, like they might not have the background to do it appropriately, but like at least give it your best shot, and that gives us an idea of how adaptable they'll be. And then at that point we usually like bring them in for an interview. But we've been very fortunate in having like a really strong team, and I'd say that's like one of the things that like we've tried to focus on over the past 3 years, was sort of like taking this idea of like I'm going to try to just like pour all the money back into the business. And when I say like, like we're very like asset light business, any online, I guess unless you're doing like a store and you have inventory, but like we're asset light business. Our real assets like our team and being able to execute on ideas. And so I try to just like pour as much back into that and bring good people along that can then like grow and advance as we grow as a company.
Yeah, the challenge with hiring, this is the most recent book that I've read from Malcolm Gladwell. It's his Talking to Strangers book. And what's really fascinating about that is the whole premise is essentially like that human beings are just inherently very, very bad at like communicating with people they don't know. They're very bad at judging them, because we as humans typically tend to think we have like a gut instinct, right? So like when we sit with somebody and we see face to face, we have this belief that like we can judge them because we assume that everybody acts the same way that we would act, right? So like that's why like Bernie Madoff, they didn't catch him for so long, even though the SEC like interviewed him multiple times. This guy basically had a dossier on him and brought it to the SEC in 99, 2003, 2007, 2008. And every time they go to interview him, they would say he gave him confident answers. And the guy said like he looked confident. And it's like, that's a sociopath. That's somebody that's like lying, but able to make themselves look like they're really confident.
Right.
So for like hiring, it's the same application, right? The interview has become such a thing, right? I need to sit down with the person. I need to see them. I need to see their eyes, and I need to talk to them and understand how they can communicate and stuff. And, we're not experts in hiring. We haven't hired a ton of people, but I do think the like activity aspect of it is really, really important. Bring your friend in. We'll do a 3-way interview. Put him on the boom mic, and we'll ask him some questions about. Hey, Noah, we got some employment questions for you. He's gone. He's back in. Never mind. I was just kidding. But like the activity is so important. It's like, just give them tasks and see how they perform it, and look at it from an unbiased perspective, right? Like if I don't really know what they look like, if I don't know really who they are, but I look at their work, that's like the most clean way. And I'm wondering if, and this is just me like thinking out loud, if at some point in the near future, like hiring would be more efficiently done by like AI, in the sense that it's just a program that just takes in a lot of data points and activities and your scores on those activities, and gives you, the person to hire. The reason I say that is like one of the examples in the book, one of the stories in the book is about lawyers, not judges, and essentially like judges that do like bond hearings, whether they're going to give somebody, bail or not. And these researchers at MIT put together this AI program to basically do the job of the judge. And the AI program had access to the person's record, the rap sheet, their crime. The only thing they didn't have access to was the actual like meeting in person. The judge had to see the person, they had to listen to him, and the AI program outperformed. It was like by like a 35 to 40% margin. It basically gave the right people bail and the wrong people didn't give them bail much more effectively, because the judge has bias. It's a human being. They have bias. They look at somebody, and that guy might give a really good story and look really convincing and say, I promise I'll never commit another crime. And they might say, you know what, I feel good about this person. They go out there and they kill somebody or commit another crime.
Right.
So I'm wondering if, like, from your perspective, like, how much weight do you put on do you like buy that, first of all, and then like how much weight do you put on the interview versus like their actual output, the actual like just data?
Yeah, I think, like one thing that's hard to measure is like someone's work ethic. Like everybody, it's like kind of like the saying, it's like, people's all like their best day of work's usually like the day they interviewed kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like that's when they like, like really like lift themselves up, and like you just see the good side. And so that's the hardest, probably like the X factor of like, and in our business, I feel like certain roles maybe someone doesn't have the competency to do or the skill set, but for the most part, like if you'll work hard, if you're trustworthy, if you're like a good team player, we might hire you for the wrong role, but we'll move you to one that works, and we'll try to like find a place for you, maybe a better fit as we get to know you. One thing that's hard for me, like I tend to like and trust everyone, and so I think it's actually been good to like move me out of the hiring process, because like when you say like, what's your first interaction? It's like, oh, well, like, or I'll hear something about someone. I was like, that's cool. Like this could be a good opportunity. And then like, I'm just like really bad at probably like saying like, hey, sorry, it's not a fit. So people now, do that role that are better than me at it, which also I think is like a growing part of your business. Like you want to be around people that are smarter than you. And so I've got a lot of people at our office that's probably smarter than me. So that's kind of like been a focus of ours, is just like try to find someone that'll have that work ethic or drive. But again, it's a little bit of a hard thing to figure out right away. And then the other thing is like when they come in, one thing we've tried to accomplish is like, when you're a smaller company, it's like you've got this group of people and it feels more like a family. Yep. And it's like, you know everything about someone, their kids or their family or their background. And then as you start to grow, it's like, how do we, and this is really the thing we're working on, like, how do we take the culture that we want to develop, like from this like close knit of people as we start to expand. And like we had someone who worked out of the office that came in, he's like, who are all these people? Like, what do they do? I don't know anyone. And it's like, well, how do we like build that culture? So we've tried different things. I'll probably like once a month maybe write like a letter, kind of like a company update type letter that we'll post in Slack. That's usually like updating on just things going on across the company. Also things about like from a culture standpoint, like how we deal with partners, how we interact with things, like if we have problems, like how we fix them, to just try to like pass that down so that it's across the board. So we're still learning on that, but I think that's a really important thing to make sure you have like a solid culture that like everybody buys into, and then also having a vision that people can buy into. Like now I think more than ever, there's a lot of like job turnover as far as like people kind of like run into the next thing, and I think
it's like record unemployment. It's not a great time to be an employer. Yeah.
Right. And so it's really hard to, it's hard to find that, but we've done pretty well at keeping people, just in the sense, I think like, obviously like there's a financial aspect, like people want to be paid a certain amount. And so it's like looking at, it's kind of like we use the terminology, it's a baseball term as far as like the sabermetrics, but like win above replacement that became a big thing. If you've seen Moneyball, where it's like, okay, hey, like this guy, we pay him, $10 million a year and he's worth like 2.2 wins. But if we can go pay two people $3 million a year that add up to 12, like 12 wins, we're actually like better off doing that than paying the one guy, a big salary. Is like we always try to look at like if we have someone that's at a certain salary level, like what would it be to replace that person, and then let's try to pay them a little bit above that so that they don't necessarily like I would never want to be in a situation where someone like makes a lateral move just and makes more money. Like if they have an opportunity where it's like, hey, I've got this big promotion opportunity or this other field and I can make a lot more money, and it's like, okay, like that's great, I'm really excited for you, but like really trying to structure that package and thinking a lot through how do we, like one, how do we pay people fairly, and then number two, how do we get people to buy into the bigger picture, because that's really where the work ethic will come in, where people feel like they're doing something as part of a team. It's definitely, I feel like the younger the person is, the less they're just solely focused on like, what is my paycheck? It's like most people now would rather have like a lower paycheck but fulfillment than a high paycheck and be miserable. And I feel like that's probably something that's changed maybe in the last like 5 to 10 years.
I completely agree about that. I think that's true even for like what I do. It's at a certain point, there's no like monetary motivation is really not a thing, and you can't work the way you need to work if you're not, one, happy, and two, actually believe in and love what you do. And I think the number, it's like what, 75,000 a year. There's like a number they've done studies like 75 or 85,000 a year. Like once somebody makes more than that, there's no incremental benefit in that person's happiness. Like nobody gets happier making 90,000, 100,000, 110,000 once they hit that number. And that might change if you have, a lot of kids or a family, but for most people, that's kind of the number. And so it's like, well, okay, if we're paying people that amount, now we need to figure out, well, how else we motivate them? And it's got to be vision, purpose, your culture, enjoying the place you work, enjoying the people you work with. And you guys do a lot of stuff, right? You have fantasy football, and you have different activities that you put together for bonding and for, internal competition, and which I think is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, we used to do a company trip. We took like our whole company and everyone's family like on a Disney cruise. And we did this for like 3 years, but we didn't have health insurance. And so, we were like, should we keep doing this Disney cruise? It's getting really expensive with all these people, or, should we maybe do health insurance? So we like kind of like put it to a vote. And it was funny. We had like one sales guy that said like, forget health insurance. I want to go on a trip. And everyone else at the company, voted for health insurance. So we started doing health insurance. But it's interesting, like, you just talk about like things that motivate people or things they're interested in. And then like we've added like a 401k, just kind of like the traditional things that a lot of companies have. But, that's another hard part. Like you might think like, hey, this is really fun for me, so it's going to translate down, to being a good thing. But it's like understanding like their motivations, their needs as well, and then trying to package that to have like a full employment package that everyone's excited about.
Definitely. So I have one more question. Then the way we do this, as everyone knows, has watched the last few weeks. We cut the live for everyone but our paid traffic training students, and then we do this rip off of Bill Maher's Overtime and Ben Shapiro and everyone else that's been doing it, where we do Q&A and the most valuable stuff. Morgan hasn't shared any of the valuable stuff until after we put it behind a paywall. So I got one more question, and then this is a question I've been asking everybody that I talk to, because I'm trying to figure it out myself, and so everyone I've been talking to is ahead of where I want to be. Like you have it seems like a great relationship with your kids and family. Like it seems like it's really, really important to you, and it's important to me. But you have a growing company. You have a lot of responsibilities there. How are you balancing those things? People I've talked to, like when I talked to Billy Jean, he said, he blends the two things. He's blending his family into his work. He's bringing his daughter to the office and making her part of the office, kind of thing. And then I talked to my friend Van Oaks last week, and he said, no, I'm kind of separating the two. Like, I don't want the two to blend together. I'm turning off and then just spending time with my kids and not mixing the two. I'm curious kind of where you stand on that, or what you've thought about it.
Yeah, I think that's a hard thing too. Like now, especially like as like you can be a lot more flexible. Like you can be on vacation, but you can spend your whole day working, or you can be at home, but your email or Slack's blowing up. And so that's something that I struggle with personally, of being able to like totally unplug. I think like at most I maybe like unplug like completely for like, even if I go on vacation like a day or two, and then it's still time spent like following up on stuff. But I'd say it's like a blended approach of like, I talk to my wife a lot about business, just like, she's like, how's your day? And it's not just like, oh, it's good, or oh, everyone hates me, that type of thing, but really just kind of like telling her about like, hey, I'm working on this deal or this. And so she's kind of at least, like humors me, I guess, even if she's not super interested at all times. But also like, I think trying to be intentional with your time, like with like kids, especially, like they have, like no idea about work. Like I have a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old daughter. So 2 girls and a wife, and then we've got a dog and a cat as well. So that's pretty much like our family.
Are they both female as well? Are you completely outnumbered?
No, the dog was a female. We finally got a male cat, and his name's Mr. Cuddlecake. So it's like, finally get another male in the family. And
you call him Mr. Cuddlecakes.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty awesome name. But yeah, so it's a hard thing, I think. Like, and my wife's good about reminding me. Like, we'll talk about it, and sometimes like if I get out of, like kind of like out of like too much one way or the other, usually it's like, hey, you're working too much or you're on your phone. And so it's like trying to like put the phone down during dinner time, or like, when I come in the door, like not to, come in the door like looking at my phone, things like that. So it's really like you have to separate yourself away. And then also, like, I think on just like the marriage front of going out, like we try to like go on a date like one night a week where we go out to dinner and get a babysitter, things like that. So that way you can talk when, uninterrupted and things like that. But yeah, it's definitely a hard thing. Like the internet's great because like you can go on a trip and still be plugged in. And so I think like it gives you more flexibility, but it's also bad in the sense that you never truly get away.
Yeah, it's tough. Even like Larissa and I went to, we went to Phuket, we went to Bangkok after we got married, but it was a workshop. I spoke there, and then we went to Phuket, but it was like a mastermind thing, and it was basically, it's all work. I mean, obviously we had a lot of fun and we had, enjoyment and stuff, but it's even like the travel has, like, we have to travel to cool places, but it's all built around work. So we're now trying to work on, like, we need to take vacations that have nothing to do with it. It's like we're going to Seattle for the weekend to visit our college roommate, and it's like nothing to do with work, and it's just about, personal time, and there's no blending of the two there. But yeah, it's definitely not easy, and it's interesting because it's still like everybody I've spoken to, no matter how successful they are, no matter how long they've been doing it, I think that's one of the areas where people struggle the most, or like just haven't mastered. I feel like everyone else is kind of like, there's a lot of other areas of your life, if you're, successful, where you kind of mastered it, or at least you've done really, really well with it. But the like work-life balance, I think that it's like an ever evolving thing that's just constantly changing, and finding like a perfect system. Still haven't figured that one out yet.
Yeah, and one more thing I'll add on that, and I know we're about to cut off, to go to the really top secret,
top secret stuff,
billion-dollar stuff, behind the paywall. But I think like one thing we've tried to do with our team is say like, hey, if somebody's off, like we want them to be off. So like don't hit them up, don't, like unless the house is on fire, like really trying to do that. And I think when you're just starting out as a business, like if it's just you and maybe like one other person, that's very difficult to do, because if you do that and you totally turn off, like your business stops. And so like as you start to grow as a team, I think you're able to do that. But you just have to be intentional about it, like you said, to say like we're going to go visit roommates, and I'm like, and I'll even see sometimes like you'll type in Slack, you're like, hey guys, I'm going on vacation, I won't be available till Monday. And I think like as hard as you work, like everyone tries to appreciate that and not immediately like send you 18 messages asking you questions. So I think in a way you just have to be intentional about it.
Definitely, totally agree. All right, guys, so if you're watching right now and you're about to be cut off, that's because you're not in paid traffic training. So if you want to get access to these bonus Q&As every single week, plus all of our courses, 2 trainings a month, a personal audit, all kinds of good stuff, go to paidtraffictraining.com, sign up today, and you won't be cut off anymore. Anybody in paid traffic training, hang on for 1 minute. We're going to cut the feed, and then we'll be over for Q&A. So we are killing feed one by one. All feeds have been terminated except for paid traffic training. All right. So we have